I'm Chad Ruthermond,
And I'm Andy Kinnick.
and welcome to NOCLIP Pocket. Man is the warmest place to hide. Today, we're going to be talking about Carrion, which was a game that was developed by Phobia Game Studio, published by Devolver Digital, and was released in 2020 on Linux, macOS, Windows, Switch, and Xbox One. And then in 2021 on the PS4. A little late on that one.
Yeah, it's weird that PS4 is the odd one out for this one, because it's usually like Xbox or Mac or something.
Yeah. Or Switch,
Yeah.
because it got ported 10 years later.
Yep. But first, if you give us a like or a rating, it would be greatly appreciated.
So, Carrion is a
A reverse horror game.
reverse horror game, which is the name. It's the sweet marketing phrase that you would use to describe this. If I'm talking about genre, I almost want to just call this a Metroidvania, but it is like the lightest Metroidvania.
Yeah. I almost kind of wanted to compare it to like Celeste, where it feels like each screen is kind of like its own individual level in a way. Like it does feel Metroidvania light.
Yes. Yeah, it is.
If you want a hair split.
I mean, it's one of those good games that makes you think about genre and how maybe they aren't as informative as maybe you think they are.
The subgenre of horror is also a subgenre of Metroidvania.
Yes. But yeah, the as far as like the Metroidvania elements of this game are going to be very like high level. You can go back to other levels and use abilities that you picked up in other levels to make different kinds of progress than the earlier ones. But the game rarely requires you to do that, and it does feel like it's mostly a forward progression.
Yeah, I feel like the level design has to be like really on point in a way that's maybe a little bit hard to appreciate while playing, because like I felt like I was never lost. It was like maybe one time I didn't know where to go.
Yeah, that's the key, is that there are like some stumbling blocks, and when they hit them is when you really feel awkward in the game. But when you're not noticing it, you just kind of go through and you're like, oh, hey, I found myself on the right path eventually. And so the game is this balancing act of being like open enough that it feels like you're doing real wandering and like figuring out what's happening, and then also guided enough that subconsciously you are going in the right direction. And if that ever breaks down, then it's kind of hard to get back on track.
Yeah, I would like finish an area and be like, I wonder where to go next. And then I would just stumble across like a new portal thingy and it would be like, oh, here we go. And then it would just be the right place to be. So yeah, that was pretty cool. And I think it really complements the movement mechanics.
Yes.
Which is like, I think the big selling point or like interesting thing about the game is you play as a big blob, an amorphous pile of mouths and eyes and stuff with tentacles. And it's hard to express, like, because it feels like it controls like perfectly or appropriately. But it's a thing that doesn't really exist. I just feel like it's really fine-tuned and feels like it controls the way it feels like it's supposed to. And like it has like really great momentum and it feels good to move around. So yeah, you're right that it does really stand out when you don't know where to go.
Yeah.
Because you're usually just constantly moving.
Yeah. It's really interesting. I would want to say that the movement in this game is a joy. Because that's like a pithy thing that people like to say and put on the back of the box. It isn't all the time. I think that it creates some awkward moments, and I believe that they're engineered to be this way.
Yeah, I feel like there's a little bit of like intentional sloppiness, like, but I feel like that plays into it and makes sense, at least in my head. Like the tentacle will be floppy and imprecise, and the bigger you get, the harder it is to kind of move back and forth appropriately.
Yeah, and it's hard to like get into small spaces, even though you are kind of like you are very capable of doing it, but you have to like give yourself time to really mash the whole of your body into a space.
Ooh, tight squeeze.
Yeah. It's very cool. And while I do think it's like, it's hard to describe the movement because the game is set in largely vertical areas, like things that you have to climb up, but your character can effectively move as if it was a top-down game and you were walking up the walls.
Yeah, you're kind of like an octopus or something. You can just kind of scurry up the walls and stuff.
Yeah, and it doesn't really impede your movement at all, like in any way, to be going against gravity. And that's kind of like the key thing about the movement in the game, or at least not the movement, but the navigation, because you are just like anywhere that's open is available to you. Pretty much whenever.
Yeah, no double jumps to get here.
Yeah. And it makes the like, just like the grotesqueness of this horrible blob that you're playing as come across, because like the reason that you can do that is because everything is pretty cramped, and so you're moving up walls, and you can imagine the creature latching onto the walls and like pulling itself up and getting onto ledges and stuff.
Squeezing through those vents.
And squeezing through vents and crawling up elevator shafts. Which makes it triply funny. I'm going past doubly. It's hysterical when you just decide to take an elevator, like actually, because you just cram the whole thing like into this little square and then reach out and pull a lever and then it goes up.
Yeah. I had never even considered doing that personally, and I was like watching a review earlier today, and someone did that, and I was like, oh, that's pretty funny.
Yeah, it's really amusing, because especially you can get like part of you stuck outside and it kind of like drags behind and you'll like slurp it back in eventually. It's a good time. I enjoy it.
Your character's almost like a liquid where it can just like kind of fill into any kind of container.
Yeah.
Just disperse itself.
If somebody described this game as fluid, there's like an equal chance that they mean easy to control or like dynamics, like fluid dynamics. Yeah, okay, so what do you do in the game?
So it revolves a lot around like what it says on the box. You get to be the monster, right? And so you are trying to escape this facility, and so it involves a lot of killing. At first, I was like, I'm gonna like, because this is a game made now, try and not kill people when I don't have to. It was like the first thing that I thought, and then quickly realized like, oh no, you have to eat people to grow. It's not gonna have like a pacifist ending.
No.
So that I quickly learned that. And so you deal with a lot of like killing people when they're around to grow bigger or so they don't kill you. And then there's also a lot of puzzle solving.
Yes.
You get upgrades as you go along, mutations, and one of my favorite things is that you're able to deposit biomass in like this pink goopy liquid, and so you can only use certain abilities when you're a certain size. So there's a lot of like switching back and forth, and the older, like the abilities you get early don't get like left behind or forgotten. Like you have to keep using them throughout.
Yeah, it's great because of that, like the risk reward payoff. Being a giant monster, you would think that you would be pretty unstoppable, but you are very stoppable. It's very easy to be stopped in this game by things like bullets and especially fire. And so the fact that there's this like the puzzle solving element where you have to drop off parts of your body in order to like be able to use certain abilities, and then usually having the ability to then go back and re-pick up the stuff means that you are trading your ability to do a thing for health. So the like kind of, not like necessarily on a perfect sliding scale, but the combat gets easier the bigger you are, but it is much harder to navigate and get around obstacles.
And you're a bigger target as well.
Which, can help make you smaller again
Yeah.
in time.
Uh-huh.
The thing that I want to shout out about this and the combat part of it, because the combat plays very similarly to the puzzles, and we can probably just lump that together into one conversation. It makes the combat feel like that old sci-fi movie version of an alien monster, where somebody shoots at it and it hides in the dark, and you don't know where it is, and then it attacks very fast, kills somebody, and then immediately goes back into hiding.
By reaching a long tentacle out to grab you from across the room?
Yeah. So you get a lot of that in this game, where you'll be like in a room and there will be like an area underground, and then you pop out of a vent and just grab a dude and pull him back down.
It's very satisfying.
Yeah, it's great. And the mechanics force you to do that. The game doesn't tell you to do it. It's just, if you don't, you will be shot to death.
Yeah, guns are very effective against you. And if you get shot in the tentacles, it hurts you.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily how you think it would work at first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so you can get like mowed down pretty quick if you don't know what's going on early game.
It's also hard to tell what's going on when you are being mowed down, because it tends to be this like very hectic, like you pop out and do your scary monster noise, and which is actually a button in the game to do a scary monster noise. That's not what I meant, but you could do that if you wanted to really immerse yourself. And then like you fly over the room and like pick a dude up on the way, and you just see bullets, and then like parts of you are like evaporating off. It's like it's incredibly hard when you're in the thick of things to make out what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
Which is kind of good. I don't know.
It feels appropriately chaotic. Like it makes it feel like what is happening. Like these people are being attacked and they're like fighting for their lives to kill you first.
Mm-hmm.
But the deck is stacked against them. In a lot of scenarios. And then sometimes there's giant walking robots. They should have increased the budget for giant walking robots.
That's true. The hubris of man.
Yeah, but I really like how when you start out, the focus is on like grow larger, and then once that you get into this mindset of like get bigger, bigger equals better, and then I like how that's like kind of when it introduces like you get like the invisibility thing to go through lasers, so you have to deposit your stuff. Like I feel like it has like a really smooth difficulty curve.
Yes. Yeah, I would argue that the game has a really smooth difficulty curve up until the very end, which if you're going to have a difficulty spike, I guess that's where it should be.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Like, the game feels so satisfying to play, and I feel like it hits that difficulty curve just right. And then, yeah, like right up towards the end, I feel like there was like one particular room where it like spiked really hard.
Yeah, well, for me, I mean, I guess it depends, because I think we talked about this briefly. I didn't hit much of a hiccup in the spot, that room that you're talking about, though I did replay a number of the sections after you get the powered ability, like that you have to get electricity for.
Oh, yeah.
For the largest form is like a shield, and its practical purpose is largely just to not die from being stuck with bombs.
Yeah.
Though you can use it as an actual shield. It will last all of one half second, but you can do it. And I had to retry a lot of those things multiple times because the puzzle requires you to put yourself in a state where you can die in one hit.
Right.
But I guess that counts as being difficult, but that's not really how I saw it. It was more like this particular thing just requires, like some of the other puzzles took multiple tries. They just didn't kill me. For me, it was like pretty smooth all the way through the game until the last segment in the jungle area. And then that was just like everything was the hardest form of what it had been up till then.
Yeah.
And just right in a row. And it took me a minute to get to one that had a checkpoint nearby, so I kept having to start back in the basement.
Yeah.
And that fucking sucked. And I was very frustrated by it. I thought that the ending was like almost kind of weak because where I was feeling like very high on it going into that, immediately just having to repeat the same rooms over and over again with these like the drones and the robots and everything. I'm like, I don't want to do this anymore.
Yeah. It almost feels like an older game in that way, like where there's just like that end game difficulty spike. Yeah, it does kind of like for a modern game, it really stands out.
Yeah,
for sure. No, it left a little bit of a bad taste in my mouth as well. But that might just be combined with my less free time I have now, made it seem worse.
Yeah, that could be.
But yeah, I don't want to like hold it against it too much though.
Yeah. I mean, like if you took the overall look on this game, like this game has a very cool idea, and I think that it executes on it really well. But the idea only lasts about 3/4 of the game, and then you're used to it. And it's not like as shocking as it is in the beginning. So you have a moment of like there's a part of the game you have to push through based solely on its mechanics, and as they're hitting their hardest point, it's a lot harder to just like really get involved in them.
Yeah, I was intrigued by like actually escaping. I think maybe that's what they want you like to be your motivation at that point. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe they could have done a little bit more to like make that seem more exciting, I guess. The moment to moment gameplay, like more false exits that you can't quite get through or something.
I think the problem is, to me anyway, is that the enemies that are fun to fight tend to be the human enemies, where they require like a type of approach, and then you execute that approach, and then the encounter with that enemy is over. And maybe there will be multiple enemies and you have to do it in different ways. But the difficult combat in the game is with machines, because they have very specific weak points that you have to actively target.
And just throw humans into them. It's probably my favorite way to kill drones.
Yeah, you can do that as well. But by the end of the game, they're just sort of like, well, we need to make this hard. And I think the more interesting way to do it would just be to put a lot of people, but instead they kind of did a mix, which I think makes sense on paper, but it doesn't translate into having a grand time.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
But I could also be bad. Like, that's also a full possibility. I will say that I played the DLC for this game, which is like a 30-minute like bonus level that's Christmas themed, so they put Christmas lights on.
It's right on the main menu, but I somehow like completely forgot that it existed.
It's impossible to get to. Like, once you start the game as Carrion, you have to close the game entirely and reopen it to get to the DLC, which is a weird choice, but like maybe it's a launcher thing and that's just how they had to do it.
Yeah, that would be more of a natural occurrence on PC, I guess.
Yeah.
Rather than it would be on console.
But when you play that, it seems more like they put a lot of people in. Like, I think there were like 2 of the walking robots in the whole thing.
Yeah, well, it being Christmas themed does make it seem like it's supposed to be like, yeah, just go fucking hog wild.
It had really interesting combat, though.
Yeah.
And it also had, I don't remember if these were in the main game, were there guys with shotguns?
Not that I recall.
Okay. Then that may have been a new enemy type they put in there. And they were cool. They also they just work like the regular shield guys with assault rifles, but they took longer to deal with because they're bigger and they have a shotgun. So, yep, I think that's my proof of concept that I think fighting dudes is more fun, because I had a lot of fun with that DLC, and less fun with the last like hour of the main game.
Right. So when it comes to the puzzle mechanics, I want to just shout out that I feel like it was really unintuitive, the difference between like the push and the pull move. You have these like little like metal stopper things that you come up against, and some of them, like depending on which side you approach it from, you either have to like ram it,
yes,
or pull it out, and like which you can only do if you're smaller, the pull move, and the push move when you're bigger. And I found that to be like hard to remember that they like did different things.
Yeah, the little plugs, whatever they are, they don't read well at all. Like, I thought I could pull them out when I first encountered them, and then later realized that you could smash them out. And, like, I don't think I realized until after, like, I had come by one and then was lost in an area for a while, and then came back to it and tried to smash it out.
Yeah, it's one of those Metroidvania setups where you come across one before you can do anything with it.
Yeah. And, but you get the pull ability so quickly after the mechanic is introduced that it now is, it really is just like just try it, I guess, on every one, because I'm not going to remember which end I'm supposed to be on to do each one.
Yeah.
I believe it is the smaller end you push and the larger end
it depends
you pull.
on, like, the gap. Like, if it's, like, a larger space on the other side, you can push it, but if it's a larger space on this side, you can pull it.
Right.
I think. But, yeah, it's just the visual cues are not very strong.
Yeah. So, yeah, I also never really remembered it and would just try whatever I had on me and then have to go back and get...
Yeah, but it's just one of those things where it's, like, easy to think, like, oh, I need to approach this from the other side, and then walk away from it. But really, you just had to, like, get smaller and pull it.
Right.
So, a little a snag there. But... I did also want to talk about a good one, is the possession ability.
Yes. Which I don't consider a puzzle-solving ability, even
it's
though
a combat ability.
It is like my favorite combat ability.
Yeah, like I ended up not using it too much because I felt like it was usually like appropriately more difficult to like initiate. But I did use it, you know, when I felt appropriate and enjoyed it a whole lot.
Yeah. It's incredibly funny to me that they gave it to you and then we're just like, this is just an option you have from here on out, and I wanted to abuse the shit out of it. It's just that kind of a mechanic where you feel like this doesn't feel like it is the intended solution, so you just want to mess with it.
Because you're so used to just like blasting things with tentacles and smashing into stuff with your mass. That you don't think to use it at first. Like you like to, I have to possess a different thing and then use that to my bidding to like pull a lever or whatever. So yeah, it does take a minute, or at least it did for me, for that to like click into place and for me to like remember to use it.
Yeah, and because of it, it also like, it was a big thing for like explaining things in the environment for me as well, because I knew there were several like times I would come across something and be like, I don't know how to deal with that. And the game gives you the environment is surprisingly complicated because you have like metal panels that you can pull out. Wood has to be charged through.
Yeah, that was a little weak.
Yeah. And all these other things, but then there were these like grates that you could stick your arms through, but you couldn't go through them, and nothing you did would remove them.
You had to shoot the web through it.
Yeah, you could shoot a web through it. There were like ways to interact with it, but you could never pass it.
Yeah, unless you were underwater.
Yeah, which is a whole other thing.
Yeah.
And
or
so,
you turn into spaghetti.
Man.
Or Play-Doh.
Did you ever be in the water with that ability with 1 health?
Almost certainly, and you're just like one noodle.
Yeah, it's like impossible. You lose the character on screen. You're like, if I just let Jesus take the wheel on that one, because I don't know where I am.
Like you put meatloaf through like one of those spaghetti Play-Doh makers.
Yes, so
that's what you look like.
Real meatloaf. The fake grinder.
Yeah.
That makes
the
single
grinder.
smooth noodle.
You know, the real version of the Play-Doh spaghetti maker, a meat grinder.
Yes. It's weird that they sold our children meat grinder toys. But no, yeah. So once I got the possession ability, it was amusing to me to go back and realize like, oh, I can just like grab a dude through this vent and then have him do shit on the other side for me.
Yeah. I also like that you could drown people as like a way to deal with them. Like you could either just grab them and pull them into the water, or you could possess them and just make them walk into it. Little things like that are fun details.
Yeah. And you can warp to people. Like if they aren't
yeah.
the big dudes, you can jump in and then pull yourself all the way into them and they explode, and then that's where you live now. And then even further to that, the fucking the big guys who you can't eat, they can be possessed as corpses, which so like they
could
stay
regular
around.
people not?
No, because they become parts, unfortunately.
Okay. Yeah, like that felt like the fact that you could warp to a person felt like it had a lot of untapped puzzle potential.
Yeah.
Like you only really need to do that like twice.
Yep. I was actually trying to count through in my head, and 2 was also the number I came to. So I think that is right.
Yeah. So, Carrion 2.
More like Carrion 2 times you have to do that.
Ooh, got him. Zing.
Yeah, Carrion 2 should just take place entirely in a single pipe that you can't leave. But you just have to go grab people and have them do things.
You're in a control center.
Yeah. You pull so many levers. The Carrion Five Nights at Freddy's mashup game is like the easy mode for that one.
So you want to talk about the little frame story?
Sure, sort of.
Because you have this like these little computer stations. I don't know what they are.
They look like the Death Star like
receptacle
viewing port thing.
So they have Death Star viewing ports in this facility, and you can like squeeze into them, and then you can view these memories, as they turn out to be, of a guy like arriving at this facility and like venturing down into the abandoned lab, with like a little group at first, and then it becomes just him eventually. But like it's like, and it ends up being you in the end. Like it's not amazing or anything, but I found it to be like it added a lot of atmosphere and intrigue, and was like an interesting twist. Because like it was the kind of game where I wasn't like thinking about it, like so I didn't see it coming, and I don't know. I just feel like it really like it's very simple, but I feel like it added like a lot to the game, at least for me.
Yeah, this is one of those games that I played a lot of when I was just sort of like awake at 4 a.m. or whatever, and I do remember being in one of those states where I was just. There was nothing happening, and it's just very dim light. There's nothing really going on. I'm sitting there, and he gets shot and turns into the monster, and I just kind of gave one of those, like, oh, wow. Because, like
you were stoned.
Yeah, like, I didn't even think for a second that that was going to turn into anything.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was like,
I knew
okay, that's just, like, 2 characters.
Yeah, I thought something would happen, but I didn't really think about it.
Yeah, it was weird. I think the game kind of puts you in that mindset. In that stoned mindset where you're just tearing through stuff.
Yeah, I think it ends up being really effective. And I really like... to lead into another thing, the pixel art of the game. And when you play as the human, I think like the camera zooms out more, and it feels like almost like another world or something. Like the way the like the size of the sprites and the detail of everything.
How like heavy you feel.
Yeah. Weird ladder physics aside, where you get to the top of it and you just kind of shimmy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think it was really cool, and especially like the parts like you already called out earlier, but like the overgrown jungly part of the facility look really cool. Like it just has a nice like polish to it.
Yeah, it's one of those games that is set in a facility where you there are just certain unattractive aesthetic environmental aspects that are just inherent with the setting.
Yeah.
And this game does like everything it possibly can to make it look more interesting.
Yeah, and I think it succeeds.
Yeah.
Like, I'll be first in fucking line to complain about, oh, it's another video game that could look like anything and be really cool, but it's in like a gray facility or in a military base or something boring. But like, this game, the setting's appropriate, and they go the extra mile to make it look cool.
Yeah.
And I applaud their efforts.
Yeah, no, and not only that, but like, this is this is one of those things where when you do say like, oh, they have a video game and they could put it anywhere, one of the things that video games don't do very often is make your character 17 gallons of human sludge.
Yeah, it is actually really significant that you don't play as a human or humanoid creature.
Yeah, or a quadruped or anything.
Yeah,
it's
pretty
blob.
rare. Yeah,
and yeah, because of that kind of thing, it's like it forces an interesting perspective on every other part of the game. So even when things are squares in a gray building, it is cool because you get to sort of squirm your way through it in a way that you wouldn't in any other game.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I just kind of like the design of the monster.
Yeah, it's very distinct.
Mm-hmm.
I just talked about square facilities, but it made me think of Portal, where it's like when you first start playing the game, you do have to like adjust your like thinking. You got to get thinking with tentacles. Yeah, it does take you a minute to wrap your mind around it, which is an experience that I always try to cherish nowadays when most games, like, you pick them up and you know exactly what to expect. Like, I always like to encounter games that throw me a curveball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, to touch back a little bit on the genre talk at the beginning of this, like, genres are largely used nowadays as like a way of
like a template.
Yeah, like you teach the player how to play a first person shooter one time and they will have an idea of how to begin playing a first person shooter that's new. It's just something that you pick up and you kind of figure out.
Mm-hmm.
And there isn't really a game that you could play that would prepare you for this. And one of my complaints that I had when I first started was it feels like there are too many buttons for me to press. And that isn't true. It's just that I didn't know what buttons I was supposed to be pressing because I haven't played a game that plays like this.
Yeah.
And then also I had played Metroid Dread between the first time I played this and this time.
Yeah,
that game's got
help.
even more buttons.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, Carrion's fucking easy in comparison.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it was interesting to pick it up and start playing. And the aesthetics, I think, help with your understanding of how to play as well, because you see the big monster and you want to steamroll over a scientist.
Mm-hmm.
That's like that's your checklist has one item and that's it.
You got anything else?
Tentatively, did you find it hard to get out of the first area, like figure out how to leave containment?
I don't remember, so I'm gonna say no.
Me neither. It was real easy. I definitely didn't take 4 minutes trying to like figure out what I was supposed to do.
What do you have to do?
Well, I can't remember now either, but I
Okay.
remember it being frustrating.
Huh.
You like first get out and then you have like 3 rooms you can go into,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a way out in one of them, but I couldn't figure out how to do
Okay.
it.
I mean, fair enough.
But I mean, that's what I would say if I didn't ace it on the first try.
First try.
Exactly. Do we have fetid thoughts?
My fetid thoughts are that this game's really cool.
What are we talking about next time?
But I remember seeing someone talk about this on YouTube or whatever, the classic occurrence, and thinking that it looked really interesting, for a lot of the reasons we talked about. Like, you play as like a blob monster, you play as the monster in the horror movie,
Right.
and you rampage through a facility. I'm like, that looks interesting. But the back of my mind, I was like, oh, is this going to be like a edgy, try to gross you out game? Like, I felt like it could skew kind of lame. But it was being talked about positively, so I figured that probably wasn't the case, and we should just play it. And I was not disappointed. This is actually surprisingly well made, I think. Yeah, like the level design, I feel like is like sneakily really great, and leads you along to where you need to go really well. I think a lot of the puzzle design is clever. Like, it's just complex enough for how long the game is. Like, it feels like in that kind of sense, like, everything feels really finely tuned around like how long the game is and what the game's goals are. Like, I think it's very well executed, and it is unique, and yeah, just like a really satisfying, cool time. And it even has like a satisfying little story in there. It's a little cherry on top. So yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it. Was not disappointed.
Yeah. I would not say that I loved this game, but I did enjoy it. I would say, like it a good bit. It's something that to me has, I mean, you look at the games that we've played this Halloween, and it does make a case that this statement doesn't mean a whole lot. But it has a very strong idea. And I feel like that's kind of, we do these games because they have strong ideas a lot of times.
And because Devolver Digital published them.
Yeah. But this, in this particular instance, I feel like the idea is so very strong that it influenced the game design, and it feels supernatural at how well the two things go together. It is a game about you trying to escape from a facility, yes, but the actions you take are dictated by almost like an instinctual feeling of what to do when you are a blob monster, and I have to commend the game for putting me in that headspace, because it isn't something I would normally expect.
It definitely taps into something.
Yeah. But yeah, so I did. I like this game. I like looking at this game. I like listening to this game. It is definitely a Halloween game, even though we debated that a little bit as to like a reverse horror game. Is that like too power fantasy to be considered like an actual horror game? But no, it is like a fun 80s horror movie, and it pulls it off with a surprising amount of aplomb. So, big ups to Carrion. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP Pocket this week.
What are we talking about next time?
Next time, we're going to be talking about the procession to cavalry. Did I say all the correct words that time?
It sounded right to me.
Sick.
But yeah, the game, it looks like an absurd adventure game, which is right up our alley, of course. But it also kind of looks like very Dada influenced, or to the layperson, like a Monty Python animation.
Yes.
So it looks really weird and cool, and you told me about it, so you might have more to say about it. But I'm looking forward to going in blind.
Yeah, no, I also know very little to nothing about it other than they animated Renaissance paintings to create a lot of the art.
Cut them out, mess them up. That's Dadaism.
That was actually Dadaism slogan that I'll probably use as the start of the next episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, we are recording this at the very Halloween hour of like 11:30 at night. So we're gonna wrap this up. However, I hope everybody had a very spooky Halloween. Ooh. And until next Halloween, until the witching hour, you can find all of our contact information at www.noclippodcast.com or on splattershot.pro. There you can find links to our email, to our Twitter account, to the YouTube where you can watch all of our old episodes, including 1 fucking million different games that we did for Halloween over the last 6 years.
Got that fat horror playlist.
And I guess more on the Metroidvania side, talking about Metroid Fusion, also has blobs in it.
Mm-hmm.
You can play
Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight.
It's got blobby insects.
Sure does. And you can play inside, but I don't know why yet. Just kind of like an idea that I had. That would be a cool game to play if you like this one.
Inside would be cool. I almost brought it up.
Yeah, play Inside. It's a fun game for cool people, and nothing unexpected happens in it. Bye.
Smash that like button.
Smash it.
With a big tentacle from the shadows.
Deposit your biomass in the comments section. Don't do that. Thank you for listening to NOCLIP this week.
Uh-huh.